So I've had a terrific day at the Headphone Connect event, and they were back in my city, so of course I had to go. Now, just like last time, I didn't want to take too much time in listening to everything that's there from the IEMs to headphones. I made a selection of about 4 or 5, actually 6 headphones that I wanted to try out that I've not really listened to before. And I'll speak very briefly about these headphones because there's no real way you can actually do an in-depth review in this kind of situation. I hope that at some point I can get my hands on these headphones and carry out an in-depth review in my style. But talking about the event by itself, it was as warm and welcoming as it was the last time, and I really have no regrets going, despite being very nervous about meeting a whole lot of people. Everybody is very calm, cool, collected, and welcoming over there. And it's not just the people you bump into or share headphones with, it's also the folk at Headphone Zone wearing those blue t-shirts. Sadly, I didn't get a chance to interact with each and every one of them because this time they were a house full, and I think they sold out a few weeks ago. But it's nice to see that this community is growing. One of the people I got to meet was Ryan. He was handling the final audio headphones as well as an amp that I just love the design of, and I've always wanted to own this. It was a kind tube amp, and I remember looking at this amp before I bought my shit audio Lear 2 as well. It's very tempting to own, but I didn't think it would fit on my desk properly, so I settled for the Lear 2 at the time. Then of course I did spend some time with Varun. I didn't spend time at his kiosk too much. He was handling all the IEMs, and they had everything ranging, I think, from 2,000 rupees all the way to well over a lakh. If you are into the whole IEM game, it's worthwhile going to that specific kiosk and spending some time there. And of course, with the knowledge that these guys have, it's worthwhile throwing any questions at them. And I also did meet Komal. She was handling the desk that had the DT900 Pro X. I fell in love with those headphones madly at the last Headphone Connect event. And they also had the Altiat Cal 1H. Now, these are very interesting because everything about these is 100% Indian. The whole concept of it was born here. It has been assembled here. It is made here. I think the head office is even in Bombay. So I would like to get my hands on this. I did spend a little time with them. They are a bit on the heavy side, but that's because they're made out of some, well, different materials. It's not your typical plastics that you used with it. Now, when it came to the headphones that I did listen to, when you entered the room in this city, on your left was a Sennheiser listening booth, and my eyes fell straight on the Sennheiser HD820s. I've heard so much about these, I've never really been able to handle them. And a few things that did stick with me with the 820s were its bass response. It's definitely pretty heavy in that range. Being a closed back set of headphones, that's obviously one of the characteristics it's bound to absorb. But apart from that, it did have terrific detail recovery, and when it came to staging, it has very good vertical stage as well. And one thing I've usually noticed with a closed back set of headphones is that they usually don't have very good timbre. These things are very evident in what you're listening to. There's a terrific, truthful approach to everything it delivers to you. And as nice as the 820 sounded, I just had to jump back to the 800s just to see what the difference was between closed backs and open backs there and then between these two models. And I'm definitely a sucker for open backs because there's so much more openness. Somehow it contributes to its a wider stage. It does contribute towards better imaging, in my opinion. These ones had terrific imaging and surprisingly a good amount of depth. In fact, from what I remember of my HD800s, I don't remember them being as punchy in the bassline. But one thing I did notice with the 800S is the sparkle and brightness that the 800 has. The 800S just seems to have just dropped it completely. Now, I know these are retuned drivers, but I did like that sparkle. I mean, yeah, it was a bit shrill to a certain extent. A lot of people didn't like the 800 because of that, but that's a big reason why I listened to my 800s through a tube amp, and it seems to mellow it out. And I think I'm going to stick with my 800s and not consider moving to the 800S. Then I moved on to the Final Audio D8000 Pro Edition. Now, these are, of course, planar magnetic headphones. Now, the last set of Final Audio earphones that I ever tested was, and only was, the E1000. There is a slight price difference between these two models. Those E1000s were pretty good for what they were. And the first thing that hits you when you use these headphones is they are heavy. They're made out of metal. They've got a lot of heft. But the weight is distributed well when you wear it. It's got a nice band. When it comes to the highs, it's got nice soft highs, and the bass is nice and defined. All the bass lines that I heard now, usually on open backs, it's not as defined as this, at least with some of the dynamic drivers that I've listened to. Unless they have tweaked it a bit, but this one has a very nice pronunciation when it comes to its bass line. I listened to a track on these that was recorded in a church setting, and usually what happens is the linger of a vocal tone that dies down through the reverb or the echo of this structure is not be a lot of headphones can't reproduce that very well. You usually hear the impact of the voice and then it dies out immediately. This one seemed to carry that decay for as long as it was meant to. So if you close your ears and listen to these headphones, it almost puts you exactly where the microphone was. Moving on to the Altiat Cal 1H. Now, this one's not a light set of headphones for sure. They don't use your typical plastics and all. I think they've used different materials like metal and wood in some cases, which is, well, it does give you a premium feel for certain. It does have detailed highs and even the mids are pretty detailed. The bass line is does seem a bit accentuated, but it's not as giving as I hoped it would be. It seems to not want to be as generous to a certain extent. One thing to keep in mind is when I moved on to these headphones, the entire environment was completely changed, because I think when I first went there may have been 40 or 50 people, but by the time I got to the Altiats, there were at least, I think, 150, 160 people. So the overall noise levels of the room suddenly rose up, and this is not a good environment to listen to open backs with. Closed backs are a different story for sure. Despite this, you can tell that this had a nice expansive stage. It definitely does sit outside of the driver. Now, despite all this environmental noise, you can tell that the stage is coming at you from a little out of the ear cups, which is quite impressive. And I did listen to a few Sophie Millman tracks, and the huskiness of her voice is carried over quite well. So I would like to spend some time with this in a closed and controlled environment, and maybe at some point have an in-depth review on these. And just for a little fun, I decided to see how noisy this environment was. Now, it's a lot of fun because everybody is sharing the same interests and conversing about their own products that they have or the products that they want to pick up and the overall enjoyment of music. But that level of excitement is carried over towards maybe about 74 or 75 dB, which is pretty high to listen to any kind of music with. Whether you're listening to closed backs or open backs, it's bound to affect you more when you're listening to open backs. But just generally, it is a nice environment to be in, but it is not the ideal setup to listen to some of this stuff if you really want to commit to buying it. For that, I strongly suggest you go on over to the Headphone Zone store and spend some time with them there and actually converse with them before deciding 100% before spending your money on some good headphones. Then I moved on to a brand that I've always wanted to get my hands on, but I've never heard before. I was pointed in the direction of Focal headphones, and the first headphones of theirs that I heard were the Stellias, and I don't think I've heard this level of detail in any closed backs that I've ever heard. It was almost razor sharp, but not sharp enough to cut your finger on. It is just so defined, almost as if your ear is right up close to the instrument that's being strummed or plucked. It's beautifully detailed. I did want to spend a lot more time with these, but I did feel that I didn't want to keep a lot of other people waiting, because that's one thing you have to be aware of. There are a lot of people who want to also get in on listening to devices, and you do need to think about your fellow audiophile and be a little considerate towards their time as well. Now, a big mistake I made was I moved from the Focal Stellia to the Focal Bathys, and these are their new wireless set of headphones. I think they're fairly new in the market, in fact, and these are obviously built for convenience. It's Bluetooth, of course, so it's bound to have some compression, especially if you're listening to uncompressed audio on the Stellias. So these do lack in detail, certainly, but their delivery in high is soft, it is smooth. I remember listening to a little bit of music which had brushes on the drum skins, which did have a very nice timbre. I think these will be more of a statement factor than audiophile levels of audio, because Focal definitely knows what they're doing in the audiophile world. Considering those Stellias sounded the way they did, you have certain limitations with wireless headphones, and these are definitely one of the most beautiful wireless headphones I have seen. You have to see it in the flesh to really appreciate it. I don't think photos or videos really do it justice. So one thing I did differently in this headphone connect compared to the first one is I took a friend along. I took my friend Bob, who's an audiophile buddy of mine. We do have our listening sessions with a whole bunch of headphones or speakers once in a while, and I didn't get a chance to really ask him if he enjoyed it. So let me get him on the line and see what he thought.
Hello.
Did you enjoy the Headphone Connect event?
Oh yes, certainly I did. Yep.
Would you recommend it to anybody else?
Oh, surely, yes.
Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you have it. It's not just me who's recommending this, it's Bob as well. And this was his first Headphone Connect event. he had a chance to get his hands on a whole lot of equipment that he's never really thought he would in the past. And it's not restricted to different people. If you are somebody who's getting into the hobby, or if you've not even thought about getting into the hobby and you just want to experience high-end equipment, you can land up with your 2000 or even 1000 rupee wireless earphones and converse with the guys at Headphone Zone. It is genuinely a very, very humbling experience to be able to talk to these guys who know their work in and out. And if you go for the event, I hope you have some fun, and I also hope you found this video informative. If you do like the content on my channel and you would like to support it, I'm sure you know exactly what to do. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.